What if I told you there was a medication that sold 25 billion doses per year in the United States? What if I told you that medication was Tylenol? That same Tylenol we use when we get a headache, we have a little fever, minor aches and pains, sells 25 billion doses per year in the United States. What you didn't know about Tylenol is that it has a fascinating history, one that's full of ups and downs and a dark twist that resulted in how we deal with over-the-counter medications in this country. So for us to understand Tylenol, we have to go back into the history and see how it was discovered. Back in the late 1800s, people were dying of fevers, or so we thought. And so the natural thought was, if you could decrease the fever, then you could stop the death. So they started looking for compounds that did this. And in 1886, there was a compound called acetanilide. It was tested on humans and it decreased fever, decreased pain, but unfortunately, it had a side effect called cyanosis, which literally means your skin turning blue. And that's because it affected the iron in our blood. So because this medication turned people blue, we couldn't use it. So they started looking for different chemicals instead. And in 1893, there was a guy named Joseph von Mering, and he came out with a study that compared a chemical called phenacetin to acetaminophen. And his concerns with acetaminophen were that it also turned people blue. As a result, phenacetin was the winner, and Bayer ended up producing it. They sold a ton of this medication. So 50 years go by, and two gentlemen named David Lester and Leon Greenberg do a little science, and they find out that this phenacetin that Bayer is producing is actually just turned into acetaminophen in the body. In order to prove that it's not toxic, they take huge doses of acetaminophen, give it to rats, and it doesn't cause any of the cyanosis. Of course, they then have to go do trials on humans, but the result is a combination of acetaminophen, aspirin, and caffeine, and they develop a drug called Triagesic. Triagesic ends up taking the market from phenacetin because it's more effective, and this combination seems to work better than the phenacetin alone. Since that time, we have all sorts of combinations. We have acetaminophen by itself, which is called Tylenol. We have acetaminophen that's in cough and flu medications. And we also have acetaminophen that's mixed with other pain medications. It's in every drugstore, given in every hospital, and chances are you have an 8-year-old bottle up in your closet right now. But the story of Tylenol is not complete without the Chicago Tylenol murders of 1982. In the fall of 1982, the Chicago metro area saw the death of 7 young, healthy individuals over the course of a few days. Because young, healthy people dying like this is unusual, the hospitals looked into it. And what they found was that each of these individuals had taken Tylenol that was laced with cyanide. They were then able to track where these medications were bought from, and they were from drugstores in the Chicago area. The interesting part, though, was that they were manufactured in 2 different locations, Pennsylvania and Texas. This meant that they had been tampered with after the medications were placed on the shelf. On October 5th of 1982, they did a nationwide recall of Tylenol, and this was worth over $100 million. They even offered free exchange of bottles of Tylenol that people already had. And unfortunately, they never figured out who committed this crime. But it did result in one significant change across the entire industry. And that's those little covers on the bottles that are almost impossible to remove, called tamper-proof lids. That's because of the Tylenol murders of 1982. So then we fast forward to today, where Tylenol is a $9.6 billion industry. As physicians, we know it's effective. We know it can treat fever, we know it can treat headaches, and we know it can take the edge off of pain. But what we don't know is how it works. We think that it works on your spinal cord and your brain and affects the way your body perceives and deals with the pain signals, but we honestly aren't sure. And even though we don't know how it works, we know it's safe, especially compared to some of the other medications that can be used in its place. And that's Tylenol. Safe, cheap, relatively effective, and readily available. While it may not be the fanciest or most effective medication ever created, the fact that it changed the way that we package medications forever cements its place in medical history. Thanks for stopping by to talk about the history of Tylenol. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and check out my previous video on the exercise prescription. I'll see you next time.